feels weird in 2025 to still be talking about this, because essentially, as long as foldable phones have existed, there's been talk about whether or not Apple's gonna jump on the foldable train, and there's been rumors for years of Apple experimenting with it behind the scenes. But in 2025, we're actually starting to get multiple reports all confirm what each other are saying, and it's actually starting to look pretty likely at this point. Let's begin. So Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has had a pretty reputable track record over the years, as has Ming-Chi Kuo, who are now both saying that they expect a foldable iPhone to launch just next year, okay? So we're talking a year and a couple months from now, and we could be seeing the first crease display on the iPhone, except I guess that's where a lot of the time and R&D has gone into the foldable iPhone over the years. Apple really wants the build quality to be solid, they want it to feel premium, and they don't want the traditional crease that you tend to find on a lot of today's modern foldables. But they have given us a lot of the specs, and I have to admit, it doesn't really sound like Apple is doing anything with a foldable iPhone that original. Maybe that's just me getting too much of my hopes up. Apple's a multi-trillion-dollar brand now. We can't expect innovation anymore. We just have Apple following the latest trends. They followed the mixed reality headset trend. They followed the AI trend. It sounds like next year, the foldable trend is just gonna be doing the same thing that Samsung did 5 years ago, and the same thing Google did a couple of years ago with the Pixel Fold, and having a somewhat normal-ish folded up iPhone that unfolds into a mini iPad, right? Like, the reports are saying around 8 inches on the interior screen, whereas closer to 5.7 to 5.8 inches on the outside screen, which made me laugh because I was like, Apple spent all this time trying to develop mini iPhones, and a lot of people still miss the days of the iPhone 10 and 10s because they could fit so many premium cameras and battery life and screens into such a small footprint, and Apple kept scrapping it on the mini iPhone or on the smaller iPhone screen sizes. Turns out they don't have anything against selling you a small screen, they just want you to pay a lot for that small screen, and the mini iPhone was just way too cheap. Maybe the margins weren't there, same thing with the SE. So it turns out Apple is comfortable to bring back the mini iPhone just as long as you end up paying over $2,000 for it, because then it can unfold into a bigger screen on the inside, and Apple can use that as a justification for, oh, see, look, we still have small iPhones in the lineup. If you care about it fitting in a small, compact footprint, here's the best way to unlock that. But even with that super high price point, you might just think, oh, well, this is just meant to be like the best of the best iPhone. All the specs go straight to the wall, and this is just what the absolute loyalist of Apple sheep out there are gonna buy. But no, actually, the more we read into these reports, it sounds like similar to the Galaxy Z Fold and similar to the Pixel Fold, there will still be a couple compromises on this folding iPhone, I assume because either Apple is trying to keep the bill of materials relatively low because it's already going to be super expensive with 2 screens, or maybe Apple just doesn't want to completely cannibalize sales of their Pro and Pro Max iPhones. But yeah, there's still going to be some compromises on this $2,000 iPhone. The ones we know about, for example, are not a triple camera setup, at least on the rear, so it's most likely going to be similar to what we see on the base model iPhone 17 and next year 18, where you have an ultra-wide lens and then a main sensor, and you can optically zoom in on that 48 megapixel sensor, of course, but it's really just cropping at the end of the day. It's not really a telephoto lens, so it sounds like they don't want to put the triple camera system on the back of the foldable. I don't know if it's for space reasons or manufacturing simplicity or something like that, but also there's talk that they don't want to ship it with Face ID. They're going to be moving back to having Touch ID on the iPhone, which is not even the case on the 16E. So I'm curious if these parts of the reports are actually accurate. But yeah, apparently to have a more simplistic and minimal dynamic island on the inside, and to prevent the iPhone from having to require 2 sets of Face ID sensors, because, you know, if you were just using it like a normal phone folded up, you'd have to have Face ID sensors on the outside, and then if you wanted to open it up and use it, there'd have to be more Face ID sensors on the inside, and that would just be too complicated. So it sounds like similar to what we see on like the iPad Air and the budget iPad, they're just gonna embed Touch ID into the power button, and that's even somewhat of a downgrade compared to what Samsung and Google are doing. They found ways of making Face Unlock work pretty reliably and securely with just a single camera sensor, but I guess if Apple did that, it would make Face ID and the TrueDepth camera system look kind of pointless. That's really bizarre to me because I think it's been proven over time those can be secure. You know, they can't be be spoofed with a photo of the person's face printed out on a piece of paper. They've tried that and it doesn't work. Simply by using machine learning and AI, there's actually ways for you to have decent face unlock with a single camera system, without a dot projector, without an IR blaster, but I don't know if Apple wants to admit that. I suppose if they did want to have Touch ID and Face ID on this device using just one single camera, they could be doing that. It's not talked about in the report, but that would purely be software. So maybe this is the first iPhone that incorporates this simplified AI-powered face unlock and also just has the option of using Touch ID if you prefer. But I have to say my biggest concern slash question with the folding iPhone is the aspect ratios sound kind of bizarre to me. Like they're saying that the outside screen is going to be more like a 4:3 aspect ratio. And I don't know, I haven't reviewed a ton of folding phones on this channel, but I do watch reviews for them, particularly on Marquez's channel, and I tend to find the best folding phones are the ones that feel the most normal and natural when folded up. And I've seen countless Android companies find ways of making the smartphone feel very normal and have a traditionally tall aspect ratio that just so happens to unfold into more of a 4:3 tablet display on the inside. And it kind of annoys me that Apple doesn't seem to be doing that. They want to have this kind of weird iOS aspect ratio on the outside and more of a almost perfectly square aspect ratio on the inside. That I haven't seen sell as well, or at least captivate as many people. So I just think in the age of big screens and big phones getting bigger and bigger every year, Apple would probably be better off just having like a 6.7-inch outside screen that unfolds into a 4:3 aspect ratio instead of a perfect square. But I think so much of what I'm reading about this phone is just like, yep, Apple has to do the thing that everybody else is doing. So I guess the folding iPhone might sell well, but it's really just going to come down to the Apple ecosystem compatibility. And yes, it'll have Apple Silicon on the inside. It'll be the first folding phone with iMessage support, right? So just that alone will probably quickly turn it into the best-selling foldable of all time, because Apple gets software, I think, better than anybody, especially when it comes to tablet software. As much as I have my criticisms with iPadOS, it usually comes down to, you know, the $1,000+ tablets that can't do macOS things, whereas I am perfectly fine with iPadOS when it comes to things like the iPad mini. They've got an amazing app store and a ton of great third-party apps to choose from when it comes to tablet software. Apple gets the animations better than anybody else, and yeah, I certainly could see the appeal of someone who wants a small iPhone on the outside, but also wants to be able to have a compact iPad mini with them on the go. But the age-old defense against foldables will still hold up. Yes, it will probably be far cheaper for you to just buy an iPhone 18 Pro Max plus a nice iPad mini, but think about it for a second. The nice iPad mini is probably not going to be OLED. It's probably not going to have as great a camera system as the folding iPhone, and it's definitely not going to be as compact and portable. You know, you're not going to be able to fold that iPad mini up and stuff it in your pocket. And if you're like me, you kind of get tired of carrying around multiple chargers. That's why I tend to typically just pack one charge brick and one USB-C cable to charge my phone and my MacBook. So I don't really feel like getting another iPad right now, but maybe, depending on how good the cameras are and how good the specs are, I might be willing to consider an iPad if it folds up, turns into my iPhone, and I can just charge one battery and that covers the needs of both devices. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Is Apple too late when it comes to bringing the folding iPhone on the market? I don't think so, although I do think it's going to be a lot less exciting than it would have been a few years ago when foldables were kind of the new thing on the block. Now it just kind of feels like Apple is following with the latest trends, and that's going to take a lot of the wind out of the announcement. It's going to be like, oh yeah, Apple, you finally did that. But Apple still has a very passionate fan base. There's a lot of loyal followers, and I think it will probably, even though it will disappoint a lot of the tech community, it will still probably be the best-selling foldable within its first year of production. Let me know your thoughts and predictions down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.